"Oh, doctor, por favor, precisamos de ti na maternidade." The nation was Angola in southern Africa, where I was living. And the tap at my window said, "Doctor, we need you in maternity right away." Moments later, I arrived to find a woman in her 20s lying unconscious on the exam table. Her name was Maria. I picked up her arm and her pulse was barely palpable. She was limp, and I turned to her family and I said, "What happened?" Well, 3 days earlier, she went into labor. Her water broke, she began to push, and then Maria began to bleed. The family called the community health worker in their village who came to their home, but then Maria lost consciousness. They carried her limp body to the highway where they flagged down a passing truck and they brought her 30 hours to the Calikim hospital where I met Maria. I took her to the operating room and opened her abdomen, and there, looking up at me, was her dead baby. Surrounded by blood and pus and her uterus that was ripped open. Maria fortunately survived, but most women do not. And around the globe, every 2 minutes, there is a woman who dies in childbirth. Usually in nations that have very few resources. Think Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, and Haiti. Now the Haitians have a proverb. It says, "I'm going to sea to catch a baby, but the journey is long and dangerous, and I may not return." Women are precious. Their newborns are precious. Some of you are familiar with the scripture, Psalm 139, that says, "You formed me in my mother's womb. You knit me together. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it well." Fortunately, there has been some progress in the health of pregnant women around the globe. And let me show you the world in 1900. On the vertical axis, we have got mortality, high mortality, low mortality. And on the horizontal axis is the income, low income and high income. And in 1900, each bubble here represents a nation. Beige is Southern Asia and India. Red is China and Eastern Asia. Orange is the European nations, and yellow in the Americas. But at that time, most nations, most pregnant women were in the high mortality corner of the universe. Now, by 1950, things have improved a little bit. You see how in European and American countries, mortality has been going down, income has been going up. And then by 1980, we suddenly get a lot more information. Southern African nations are the blue bubbles, and Northern Africa are the green bubbles. But yet 30 years later, in 2011, the maternal mortality in Southern Africa, the blue countries, has not improved at all over those 30 years. Now, what is it that's killing these women? We want to know, because this is how we can intervene on their behalf. So if you look at causes of maternal death, about a quarter of them, from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, that is hemorrhage. Usually after the baby is born. We call it postpartum hemorrhage. And then from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock is hypertensive disorders of pregnancy, eclampsia and preeclampsia that causes heart failure and kidney failure and seizures. And then from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock is failure to progress, or obstructed labor. Now, this is what almost killed Maria. Her uterus was contracting, but the baby was not expelled, and the uterus muscle eventually broke open and caused her to almost bleed to death. Well, then there is sepsis, 7 to 10 o'clock. And this is infection that rises from the outside, goes through the vagina, infects the baby, the placenta, and the mother herself. And then between 10 and 12 o'clock, we have preconditions. Women who already had heart disease, they already had chronic lung disease, and then they become pregnant, which puts a lot more stress on their heart and their lungs. And then there are certain infections that are extraordinarily lethal in pregnant women. Malaria in particular is likely to kill a woman who is pregnant. Now, there are certain women who are at very high risk for these kind of problems. They may need special care. So women who are very young, women the first time they become pregnant, women who are older, women who have chronic diseases that are already present. They already have tuberculosis, they already have malnutrition, and then they become pregnant. As well as women who have had numerous previous deliveries. All of these are going to require special care. Similarly, there are certain newborns who need extra care. By far around the globe, the biggest risk to the newborn's health is being born too soon. And so one of our principles of prenatal care is preserve that pregnancy, ideally for the whole 40 weeks, but at least for 34 weeks. If we can get them to at least 34 weeks, then the risk of breathing problems, of feeding problems is much less. Now, this is a picture of the problems. Now, what are we going to do about it? What are the interventions that are most powerful to preserve the life of these women and their newborns? Well, we can start at the beginning and we can look at the very end. So, the very beginning has to do with family planning. Most women in Angola, where I lived, have 5 to 7 children. That's kind of the norm. But when I would talk with them privately, they would say that they really would rather not have so many children. They realize there are certain benefits to a smaller family. More resources for the children, more resources, more education opportunities, better nutrition for their kids. The health of the women themselves is also better because every pregnancy is associated with risk, and that risk multiplies by the number of pregnancies. Now, with this in mind, how are we going to get there? In traditional societies, the expectation is that a teenage girl will be married and will begin reproducing. Providing alternatives for them is really important. So give them a pathway to continue their education. Give them career opportunities, skill development opportunities, income earning opportunities, which not only delays childbirth, but it gives them more autonomy, more power, control over themselves moving forward. Contraception is another important piece of this. The world over, the same kind of objections to contraception are present. Will I ever be able to get pregnant again if I use this? What's it doing to my body? Is it even available? Is it too expensive? And then often it is not the woman herself who is making these decisions. It is the mother-in-law or the husband or her own mother who is dictating how many children the family will have. Now, at the same time we're talking with them about contraception, we can also explore other very important women's health issues. In most of the world, women do not see a healthcare professional, and so we want to take advantage of that moment to address other pressing issues. Domestic violence, sexual transmitted disease screening, gynecologic cancer screening, chronic diseases like hypertension or diabetes that might have never been detected until that contraception counseling appointment. We can also talk about care of their newborn babies. The other powerful opportunity to intervene is at the time of delivery, since that's when the most common lethal complications occur. Some of you are healthcare professionals. You're healthcare profession students. And for your obstetrics, you will do your training at a big medical center that has a fully developed maternity. They've got the staff, they've got the drugs, they can do the cesarean section in 2 minutes. They've got protocols in place. I want you to imagine that you are starting a birthing home from scratch. You're going to West Texas or West Kansas or West Africa where there is nothing. And now it's up to you to design a birthing center. What do you want your birthing center to be able to do? Well, you need to be able to monitor the woman in labor, provide some pain control, observe for complications like I just described, and be able to intervene if she starts bleeding, if she has signs of infection, if her labor is not progressing. You'll need to be able to resuscitate that newborn baby if it cannot feed, if it cannot breathe at the time of delivery. Today, I lead the Institute for International Medicine, and we work with people like you, young healthcare professionals who are really inspired about the possibility of helping women who are in the United States or who are in a developing country around the world. At the Institute for International Medicine, we focus on the world's most forgotten people, those who are undereducated, unemployed, veterans, people with disabilities, elderly, those who are suffering from disasters and civil conflict. We offer a master's degree in international health. And I was recently back in Angola with one of our Masters in International Health graduates. We were both on call for maternity. Doutor, por favor, precisamos de ti. I arrived back in maternity a few moments later and expecting another disaster. But instead, there was my graduate. And there was a young woman and her baby. And the graduate told me, well, this woman, she went into labor 3 days ago and she began bleeding. They brought her in and I delivered her baby and I resuscitated that kid when he wasn't bleeding. The Haitian proverb says, I'm going to sea to catch a new baby, but the journey is long and dangerous and I may not return. Join me in working to preserve the life of these precious mothers and their newborns so that this Haitian proverb becomes forgotten.